Hello, you need your black beauties out, and you should be open to page 42, chapter 11. So take a second, open it up to page 42, chapter 11. Everybody there? All right. We're going to read the chapter, and we're going to talk about it a little bit, and then you're going to answer some questions. Plain speaking. The longer I lived at Birtwick, the more proud and happy I felt at having such a place. Our master and mistress were respected and beloved by all who knew them. They were good and kind to everybody and everything, not only men and women, but horses and donkeys, dogs and cats, cattle and birds. There were no oppressed or ill-used creature that had not a friend in them, and their servants took the same tone. If any of the village children were known to treat any creature cruelly, they soon heard about it from the hall. The squire and Farmer Gray had worked together, as they said, for more than 20 years, to get bearing reins on the cart horses done away with, and in our parts you seldom saw them. But sometimes, if mistress met a heavily laden horse with his head strained up, they would stop the carriage and get out. The reason that the driver in her sweet, serious voice, and tried to show him how foolish and cruel it was. So what can we tell from that passage? What are bearing reins? Bearing reins keep the horse's head up and pointed up to the sky, and it would put a lot of pressure on their mouths. I don't think any man could withstand our mistress. I wish all ladies were like her. Our master, too, used to come down very heavy sometimes. I remember he was riding me towards home one morning, when we saw a powerful man driving towards us in a light pony chaise, with a beautiful little bay pony with slender legs and a high-bred sensitive face and head. Just as he came to the park gates, the little thing had turned towards them. The man, without word or warning, wrenched the creature's head round with such a force and suddenness that he nearly threw it on its haunches, recovering itself. It was going on when he began to lash it furiously. The pony plunged forward, but the strong, heavy hand held the pretty creature back with force almost enough to break its jaw, while the whip still cut into him. It was a dreadful sight to me, for I knew what fearful pain it gave that delicate little mouth. But master gave the word, and we were up with him in a second. "Sawyer!" he cried in a stern voice, "is that pony made of flesh and blood?" "Flesh and blood and temper," he said. "He's too fond of his own will, and that won't suit me." He spoke as if he was in a strong passion. He was a builder who had often been to the parks on business. "And do you think," the master said sternly, "that treatment like this will make him fond of your will?" "He had no business to make that turn. His road was straight on," said the man roughly. "You have often driven that pony up to my place," said master. "It only shows the creature's memory and intelligence. How did he know that you were not going there again? But that has little to do with it. I must say, Mr. Sawyer, that more unmanly, brutal treatment of a little pony it was never my painful lot to witness. And by giving way to such passion, you injure your own character as much, nay more, than you injure your horse. And remember, we shall all have to be judged according to our works, whether they be towards man or towards beast." Master rode me home slowly, and I could tell by his voice how the thing had grieved him. He was just as free to speak to gentlemen of his own rank as to those below him. For another day, when we were out, we met a Captain Langley, a friend of our master's. He was driving a splendid pair of greys in a kind of break. After a little conversation, the captain said, "What do you think of my new team, Mr. Douglas? You know you are the judge of horses in these parts, and I should like your opinion." The master backed me a little, so as to get a good view of them. "They are an uncommonly handsome pair," he said, "and if they are as good as they look, I am sure you need not wish for anything better." But I see you got hold of that pet scheme of yours for worrying your horses and lessening their power." "What do you mean?" said the other. "The bearing reins? I know that's a hobby of yours. Well, the fact is, I like to see my horses hold their heads up." "So do I," said Master, "as well as any man, but I don't like to see them held up, and that takes all the shine out of it. Now you are a military man, Langley, and no doubt like to see your regiment looking well on parade, heads up and all that. But you would not take much credit for your drill if all your men had their heads tied to the backboard. It might not be much harm on parade, except to worry and fatigue them. But how would it be in a bayonet charge against the enemy, when they want the free use of every muscle and all their strength thrown forward? I would not give much for the chance of victory. And it is just the same with the horses. You fret and worry their tempers, and decrease their power. You will not let them throw your weight against their work, and so they have to do too much with their joints and muscles. And of course, it wears them up faster. You may depend upon it. Horses were intended to have their heads free as men's are. And if it could act a little more according to common sense, and a good deal less according to fashion, we should find many things work easier. Besides, you know as well as I that if a horse makes a false step, he has much less chance of recovering himself if his head and neck are fastened back. And now," said the master, laughing, "I have given my hobby a good trot out. Can't you make up your mind to mount him too, Captain? Your example would go a long way." "I believe you are right in theory," said the other, "but that's rather a hard hit about soldiers. But, well, I'll think about it." And so they parted. So, what is Master trying to convince the other horse rider of in this story? He's trying to convince them not to use those bearing weight reins that keep the horse's head up. Because not only does it fatigue the horse, what does fatigue mean? Can you guess what fatigue means? Fatigue is when you're tiring something. When someone's getting tired, they're getting fatigued. So this is making the horse more tired. And it also is making their tempers not good. Now, what does they mean by tempers? When we say someone has a bad temper, we mean that usually that they're getting angry. It can also mean their general disposition. So how they act, how they feel. So the master is saying in this case that the bearing reins are going to make the horses feel worse and be more tired. And that is not going to help the horse. And it's not going to help the master either, who is trying to get the horse to work. Also, there's something interesting that he says. He says it on page 43. Turn to page 43. At the very, very bottom of the page, he says to Mr. Sawyer, "I must say, Mr. Sawyer, that more unmanly, brutal treatment of a little pony it was never my painful lot to witness. And by giving way to such passion, you injure your own character as much, nay, more than you injure your horse. And remember, we shall all have to be judged according to our works, whether they be towards man or towards beast." What is the master trying to say to Mr. Sawyer? Take a minute and think about it. You can pause the video if you need to. What is he trying to tell Mr. Sawyer? He's trying to tell Mr. Sawyer that by hurting his horse, he's hurting his own character, what other people think about him, the way that he reacts to situations. He is hurting himself by hurting others. So the way that we act, if we are not acting in a virtuous way, then we are hurting others, but we are also hurting ourselves because we are making ourselves less virtuous. Remember, we talked about reputation with Black Beauty. The master is trying to say that he's hurting his reputation as well. And so what other people see him mistreating his little pony, they're going to think badly of him. And character has to do with a lot with what's coming from inside you. So he's hurting his own character, his own internal self, by making bad decisions and being unvirtuous. So that's one of the reasons why we need to always have our virtuous character. So that way, not only do other people see that we are virtuous, but also that we can be virtuous inside. So those are a couple of things that the master is trying to say to other people that might not be doing the right thing. And he is seemingly a good master because he's very concerned about what the horses are feeling and about what he can do to help the horses be their best so that he can be his best in his business. So right now, he seems to be a very good master. We're going to have to compare this with other masters that Black Beauty might have in the future. All right, so now you're going to answer a few questions about the chapter, and then you need to read it again by yourself before you do your summary. Okay? You can do your summary on notebook paper, but I want you to make sure that you are reading it again and then doing your summary. Then come back to Jupiter, okay? And there'll be another assignment that has the summary, and you can type in your summary. But first, you can do it on notebook paper if that helps you. You don't have to, but you can. Okay? And if you have any questions, you can let mom or dad know, and they'll email me, and I'll let you know what to do. Okay? Well, I hope you enjoyed that chapter, and I'll see you all soon.